Okay, I've worked out our next campaign. You're all gonna be ancient samurai in modern day Tokyo. Haha! Yes, that's right. You're gonna wander around the streets of Tokyo with your samurai swords and you're gonna slay bad guys. What do you think? Hello and welcome to this week's episode of the Campaign Creator Series. My name is Guy and I'm definitely not a samurai. We're going to be talking today about your next campaign. Now last week we spoke about how to evolve your campaign. So you're using the same world, you're moving forward, you're looking at how to do things differently. Let's say that you've done some testing of the waters and the players have gone, nah, we want something different. We want a different genre. We want a different style. We want something. How do you then step forward? How do you move forward without losing your mind, basically, by going, no, I have to make a whole new campaign? Well, here's some steps that I go through, generally speaking, when I want to make sure that I'm going to run a game that's as exciting as the previous one, especially if it's ended successfully. That's something that you want to capitalize on. And it's something that we don't necessarily do often enough, is to reflect back on what worked. Now today's episode is sponsored by World Anvil, worldanvil.com. They are a world aggregator, and something that they have, which I think works really well for everybody, is that they've got campaign notes, where you've made notes on your campaign as you've been playing through your campaign. One of those notes that you should be making for yourself on a fairly regular basis is what worked and what were the players' reactions. What made them go, oh, that's so amazing, mind blown, versus, yeah, okay, right, so we're going to go to the tavern next. Is that, you're like, but that was the big moment. No, it didn't really work. So, what were the players' reactions? Reflect upon what worked within your campaign from your players' perspective. When there were chats on social media, when there was interaction going on, what were they talking about? Were they talking about the twists and turns? Were they talking about the NPCs? Look at that, reflect upon that, and unpack that, so that you kind of get an idea on, well, they preferred this or they preferred that. I know it sounds simple and I've said it before, but this is a really good starting point to decide upon where you should go. Then look at your style. Style is important and it's very difficult to pin down. Your style might be more narrative or simulationist. I've done videos on what your particular GM style might be. Perhaps you are someone who wants to co-create, whatever. You don't have to change your style, and in some cases you can't actually change your style as to how you GM, but perhaps you can change the style of the game. So if the last game was fighting against a singular large adversary, I would suggest that your next game is perhaps more differentiated. It's lots of little enemies. There isn't one singular giant mastermind behind it. Or maybe it's a council of masterminds that the players can pick off slowly one by one. It's important to understand that maybe you don't need to change your style. Maybe when you reflected back on your campaign, everyone loved it, and now they just want to do a Star Wars version of your fantasy. Or they want to do a Cthulhu one of your Star Wars one. Perhaps they want to do something completely different, and they want to go and use 7th Sea or Savage Worlds. Maybe it's just the system that they want to change. It's not actually your campaign style. And I think that that's important. Is your style of running the game, is that what's contributing to the happiness of the players? In which case then the system doesn't really matter. Or is it the system that contributed to the players' happiness? In which case then you can look at your style and try and figure out how to do it better. So for example, in the idea of running a game set in Tokyo in a sort of cyberpunk dystopian future, is your style of being narrative going to work? Is that what the players responded to in the last session, in the last campaign I should say, or not so much? Did they kind of go, yes, less NPC dialogue, more let's just get on with the combat and stuff? If you need to change up, then you need to look at maps, you need to look at more tactical kind of stuff, more of that kind of battle. So you are doing something different. If on the other hand they loved the way that you did it, your cyberpunk setting, the rules, you need to now look at those rules and say, well, what are going to get in the way of my story? What little nuances of the gaming system are going to prevent me from achieving the stuff that got my players really excited before? So when coming up with a campaign, it's not so much about what is the actual narrative. Those questions are important, and those questions you're going to get to. But first you need to decide how you're going to do it. And finally, I always like to sleep on it. Now, there are many options, but which one remains? When you go, oh, let's do a campaign in Tokyo. No. Let's do Cyberpunk. No. Let's do Star Trek. No. Oh, Cthulhu could be. With all of these different options floating around, and we have literally hundreds and hundreds of options for role-playing systems, for settings, think about it. Don't necessarily just jump straight into it. Pause for a little bit. Generally speaking, when you've got a group that's running every single week, you've got a nice regular session going on, the conclusion of the campaign, suddenly you're going, well, what are we doing next week? Next week could very well be character creation. It could be that point. I would strongly recommend against that. Have somebody else perhaps run a one-shot or a pre-written module or an adventure which you've picked up from, say, being a patron of this channel. Maybe, no, run something, run anything, something very different to what was going on so that everyone can have a bit of fun, and you, particularly you who will be running the campaign, have an opportunity to sleep on it and to mull it over and to think about it and to watch TV series and to really get involved and get into it. If you looked and if you were part of our Campaign Creator series thus far, you would have seen that there is definitely a sense that you need at least 4 or 5 weeks to prepare before you launch into a major campaign. You don't have to do that. You can run it concurrently as you're developing as the game goes along, especially if you start the characters off in a isolated little dungeon somewhere or a starship that has nothing to do with anything. They can be running around in that for weeks doing an adventure on what killed the actual owner or the owner's trying to kill them whilst you are in the background developing stuff. You can certainly do that. Again, though, I would fall back to saying let's do a one-shot, let's just hang out, let's chat, let's discuss, let's unpack. Sleeping on it, though, is critical. When people say to me, and it actually happened the other day in one of the live streams that I was doing, people saying, well, once you've finished with the particular game you're running, what's next? It's a very on-the-spot question because I haven't focused on what's next. And this is the nugget of, I don't know, insight or inspiration that I received quite a while ago, nearly 10 years ago now, is if you are thinking about your next campaign while still running the current campaign, I would say that you're in dangerous territory. Personally, if I start thinking, oh, the next campaign I'm going to do this, next campaign I'm going to do that, I'm immediately starting to dissociate from the campaign that I'm running currently. I'm immediately starting to go, yeah, let's just wrap this up now. I'm done with it. I'm over it because I want to get to the next one. So I purposefully go, oh, that'd be an interesting campaign. Park it, forget about it, sleep on it for the next 12 months or however long the current campaign runs. The moment you start thinking about something else, that's where you're going. It's very, very dangerous in my opinion. So I consciously, if I start thinking about another campaign, I just shut it down and I say, no, I am not thinking about this right now. I'm thinking about something far more important, which is the current game I'm in. So before you get to your next campaign, before you do what we talked about last week, which was evolving that whole space, stop. Refocus on the current campaign and finish that to the best of your abilities first before moving on. These are my thoughts on what you should be doing when you have got to the end of a campaign. Whether if you're not going to evolve it, if you're going to try and choose a new system or a new process, this is the one that I would go through first before you make any kind of decisions. And as always, there's no need to rush. You can always find modules and adventures that have been pre-created for you that you can run whilst you are thinking about these different things. Until next time, however, I wish you and yours the very happiest of campaign creation.